So hello and happy Friday. Today is Friday, September the 17th, and this is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 126. I'm Frederick Dunn, and what do you think the temperature is outside today? 77 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 25 degrees Celsius, and it's partly cloudy. So I was outside checking into things today because one of the common things that people ask me about is what's blooming in your area. And before I get into that topic, this is the way to be. So if you're joining us by podcast, thank you for listening. You're just hearing the audio version of a YouTube video, and you can follow the links down in that description at Podbean, the way to be, and see some of the video sequences if there's a visual you might need. So thanks for being here today. Anyway, back to what's going on outside. What are the bees jumping on? And they're all over the cosmos. So in the cover shot of the thumbnail of today's video, those are cosmos seeds, and there's good and bad associated with that. See those cosmos seeds? The flowers have gone by, and those are the seeds. I was out there this morning checking them out because I want to see what the bees are showing a preference for, because we have an abundant nectar flow going on right now here in the northeastern United States, the state of Pennsylvania, the Great Lakes region. 1,300 feet above sea level, for those who care. And so the cosmos, that's the good and the bad, because I was looking into that a little bit. I have a cosmos flower mix, and I'll put a link down in the video description so you can go check it out. It's not an affiliate link. I don't get anything if you buy stuff from Eden Brothers, which is where I get the seeds from. But here's the thing. When I looked into the cosmos, which the bees are all over, like stand in front of a collection of cosmos, it's 4 to 5 feet tall this time of year. And there are 6 or 7 bees within arm's length on one patch of thousands. This runs over 700 feet, the length of my cosmos garden. And the bees are all over it, but here's the thing. When you get into that, and I was collecting these seeds, realizing that how easy is this to just collect them into your hand? Comes right off. Then you get these right here, and you could plant them yourself next year. Put them in a paper bag so they're nice and dry. And they don't need to go through a freeze cycle or anything like that. You can just put them on the soil. You don't have to put them in the soil. So I do a light tilling, spread them by hand, roll them in. Now here's the thing. The blossoms on a cosmos plant last 8 days on average. That's a very long lasting blossom. The other thing is they provide huge amounts of pollen for the bees. And the pollen is roughly 19.5% protein. Fantastic this time of year, because what are the bees going to be doing? Making those fat-bodied winter bees soon. And so we really want premium resources for them, and we want it to be diverse. So the other thing is cosmos. What else are they good for? Nectar and pollen, and it's really high on the nectar scale. So what the heck could be wrong with it? Why wouldn't you just grow it anywhere? Well, do a little deeper dive on that. Then you find out, guess what it is? It's on the invasive species list for plants. So the concern is that the cosmos displace native plants. And then when you look it up, there's all these native alternatives to the cosmos plants for pollinators and things like that. But guess what else is not native that we have here? That's right, the honeybees themselves. So the honeybees are non-native. But anyway, this is the pickle, and that's what I have to tell you about. Is that if you're going to plant cosmos everywhere, you can expect some of the purists in your environment, in your area, to get after you because you're planting an invasive annual, not perennial, it's an annual flower. And I bought a 5-pound bag of seed for next year already, so I'm already committed to next year. So here's a toss-up. What do you think? Is it worth planting a non-native species of flower? It is allowed in the United States. It works all the way from zones 2 to 11, so that's broad spectrum application. Also, why you don't have to freeze the seeds over winter to get them to replant them the following year. You broadcast them, you roll them in, you don't even have to stick them in the ground. They just come up and they grow. Not only that, they grow in really dry areas, and they also grow in really moist areas, which I'm testing out. This was my first year with them, but I'm telling you, I'm getting a huge nectar flow off of them, and I can't wait to see how that impacts the honey that we're going to get out of the hives here soon, because I'm going to start buttoning things up going into the last week of September here, and that's when we're going to pull off all the honey. We're going to find out what it tastes like, what it smells like, and what impact the cosmos have had. So the blossoms last for 8 days. Plus, they give a per day rating on the nectar that comes from different blossoms from different plant species. And the flowers of the cosmos are ranked right up there in the top 3. So normally when I don't have cosmos blossoms all over my fields, they are on goldenrod. Goldenrod is mid-stride right now on the downhill slope. So we would be gradually coming to the end of the goldenrod nectar flow. The other thing that's coming strong right now are the Maximilians. So the Maximilian sunflowers, by the way, if you plant those, it's like bamboo. That stuff is perennial. It grows 7, 8 feet tall, so it's a great screen, by the way. So if you're setting up a backyard apiary and you want to have a plant that comes back every year that provides for the bees pollen and nectar, and it grows really tall and provides a visual screen this time of year, then Maximilian sunflowers would be a good choice. But the bees are on the Maximilians, but not anywhere near as much as they are on the cosmos. Third, where I see the bees on. So what I'm doing is I'm walking around, I'm looking at bees, and I'm seeing, within arm's reach how many bees are on each different plant variety. So the next one is the Maximilians. They are on them for sure, just not as much as they are on the cosmos because now they have so many alternatives. Number 3 in the lineup here is goldenrod, and that, as I said, is in mid-stride. It's on its way out. Asters are still coming in, so they're on the asters. So that's good. And then white clover, they're on, but it's really kind of fading. And so what the bees, their number one source, based on what I observe in the fields out here, is the cosmos right now. So I'll leave a link to these flowers these are the ones that I noticed right away that they're coming in on. And if you're in my area, when you walk out into your apiary, you should be smelling the honey in the air. It's thick. They are putting on several pounds a day on some of the larger colonies. And one of the reasons why my late season swarms are doing so well. So people have asked me to update on some of the late season swarms. The storm swarm, the ones that I got with the BVAC, by the way, that Colorado BVAC that I reviewed just in time, I got swarms on that and put them in boxes. One of those has filled a 10-frame, single deep box. All the frames are full of capped honey with just little patches of brood on them because that's all that's left. So I had to super already beehives that were just hived. Now we're talking a month back for some of them. So they're prolific. So the environment must be providing a lot. So that's all interesting stuff. So I'll jump right into the very first question. If you want to know how you can post your own question, put it down in the comment section below or follow the links in the video description that will take you to my page so that you can fill out a form that allows you to ask a question anonymously if you want to. So we'll jump right in with Adam here. Rogolski is what I'm guessing. I know these things can be highly variable due to location, weather factors, etc., but if you had to mark a date on your calendar that you would expect your queens to start laying the eggs that would develop into their winter bees, when would you estimate that to be? And is there anything beekeepers can do at all to guarantee that those bees come out as healthy as possible? Well, one of the things that we just ran down here, first of all, fat-bodied winter bees, if you don't already know, are bees that are developed late in the year, and they are different from normal worker bees, and they're designed to live for several months instead of many weeks as they do right now. So right now, a forager might live 5 or 6 weeks. When we get to the end of the year, these have to go 5 or 6 months. So when they start to make these fat-bodied winter bees, there's some discussion among entomologists whether or not they should even be considered a different caste. What the heck is a caste, Fred? What are you talking about? Well, the queen is a caste, so that's, as we all know, the reproductive center of the hive. And then we have the drones, which are the male bees. That's another caste. And then we have the workers. So there are 3 accepted castes of bees in the colony. So then some people want to consider the fat-bodied winter bees to be a caste unto themselves because they're physiologically different. And that means that they actually have fat cells that other bees don't have. So the worker bees don't have them. So they're in the abdomen, they're in the thorax, and they're in their head. So they have fat cells and the capability to store fat resources and pollen resources and protein resources so that, and I've mentioned this before, but we'll recover again what they do. They have the ability to provide resources to brood in the complete absence of resources stored in the hive. So for example, if they didn't have a bunch of pollen stored in the hive in the middle of winter, your nurse bees could actually start to help you develop brood in the absence of stored pollen. Stored pollen is great to have, but in the absence of that, they could do it on their own. So the triggers for this, to answer Adam's question, really doesn't have anything to do with the length of the day, which our days are shortening now. What really triggers that is the lack of resources coming through the door. And the reason that I say that is because sometimes some colonies will produce winter fat-bodied bees. So we put winter on them, but it should be a dearth period that inspires them to produce fat-bodied winter bees, because those are during times of famine. Most people have a winter dearth. A dearth is a period when there's nothing coming in from the environment that could sustain a colony of bees. So the trigger is when those things come to the end, and that could be different for me than it is 15 minutes north or south of me, because it's directly related to environmental resources that are coming in for the bees, pollen and nectar. And the pollen is the trigger for reproductive stock in the bees, so for baby bees. So as those things start to taper off, as the workers start to bring in less and less pollen, fat-bodied winter bees are being made then when there is still pollen stored in the hive, and that's why we want the healthiest bees. So related to that, we would want your bees to be in an area where they can get pollen resources from a variety of different floral sources. So like here we have cosmos, maximilians, goldenrod, asters, white clover, and I'm sure there's more. There's ragweed and all this other stuff that they only get pollen from ragweed, for example. So nectar, pollen, and everything else, but the quality of the protein, that's why when you look up the protein count of different pollen resources, so different floral resources, they have proteins assigned to them, and bees need a minimum of 20% protein to be really healthy. Another cool thing recently is that Randy Oliver, Scientific Beekeeping, just published in the American Bee Journal, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Bee Journal or one of the other pubs, but he just published his pollen sub patty. So pollen subs and how well they prepare your bees for winter, so get those fat-bodied winter bees good to go, and whether or not they impact brood levels and the stock in the colonies. So, and this is again, we make the split because my target group is backyard beekeeping, but if you're a commercial beekeeper, you want to build your stock, keep your stock high, because in February, you're going to be out going to almond groves and things like that. So Randy Oliver, that's his focus, so he wants to build his stock up. So those that just, for example, fed sugar, dry sugar in wintertime, they were very low as far as reproduction and hive stock going into winter and coming out of winter in the spring, as compared to those who were given a whole list of supplements that was published in his article dealing with pollen patties and things like that that boosted them. So I recommend that you check that out. If I find the link to his study, we'll get that in there. But artificial supplements, pollen patties, and things like that do not compare with what they're getting from the actual environment. And if you're a backyard beekeeper, my personal opinion, just an opinion, is to let the bees match the rhythm of the environment in which you're keeping them, so that you're not spending money on supplements. And here I am, I've got pollen patties, bee feed. You know how expensive this stuff is? I think this one little pollen pack from Natural Apiary, that's like a $17 pack. So if you're commercial, I don't know how you afford to do that on, 1,200 hives or 900 hives. So you end up getting custom mixes or making deals with these companies to buy things in bulk. But for the backyard beekeeper, I see something like this. I mean, I need to know about it, right? Because I have to share and teach and let you know what I think works and doesn't. But I don't think it's necessary if you have an environment that supports your bees on their own, because we want a natural decline in bee numbers, and we want them to not reach a critical low number to where they can't do all the tasks they need to do inside the hive, which includes fat-bodied winter bees, the ability to cluster for winter and have more than 5,000 bees, which actually is not a lot. If we pulled a deep frame from a brood section on your beehive and both sides of that deep frame are covered in captive brood this time of year, that's more than 5,000 bees. So in a small hive, in a small body, which matches Dr. Tom Seeley's, Darwinian beekeeping method of a deep box and a medium box, and then you're good to go for winter, and that's in New York and Ithaca area. So what we're doing in the backyard is not ramping up our bees and getting ready to market them as pollinator services. So we just want to keep our bees healthy and go into winter. So I know I'm way off the rails here probably on this, but weather factors don't have as strong an impact on the bees as a trigger as do the resources coming in. If they can get out and they can fly, which low 60s, they can still fly, forage, and get resources and bring them in. But of course, then if they had large brood, they're going to be using a lot of those resources to keep the existing brood warm, and that's why they use up their carbohydrates, which is the honey resources. So we need, the trigger for that is environmental resources over length of day, temperatures, and things like that, other than if it gets too cold that they just can't fly. And they would, of course, kick that off. Here, I would expect them to be building the fat-bodied winter bees at the end of this month, first week of October, because by the time we're into November, it could be too cold for them. So just like any other worker bee in the hive, they need 21 days from egg to adult. So if they started that in the first week of October, they make it just in time, and just as those resources in the environment start to dwindle. So then they still get maximum health benefit from the pollen resources that are coming in. So, hope that answered that question. Moving right along to question number 2, which is David Love. It says, Fred, if the bees make 3 queen cells, and you don't want the first queen out to kill the other 2 queens, can you put the cells in queen cases? If so, will the nurse bees feed them in the cases? Now, this is interesting because it doesn't say whether a queen exists there right now. In other words, have they already swarmed? Is there a resident queen? And now we have queen cells. We want to preserve those and let the resident queen swarm out later. Is she already gone and all we have now are the queen cells that are fully developed and near being capped, or if they are in fact capped right now? You can cage them. You need the room to do it. So here's the problem. If we're at the bottom of the frame, or normal, this is a medium frame, but you might be talking about a deep, but the principle is the same. If their cells are down here in a row, which they often are, or sometimes they're on the edges over here, caging them can be a challenge. So you could actually cut them out, which I've done, and put them into other hives. So for example, if you have a nucleus colony, you can set them aside, get a partial frame of brood with nurse bees in it and everything else, and I cut out the queen cell carefully so not to even smush that queen cell the slightest bit, and then I just take a pin and I stick her right on a piece of beeswax comb. And I put that in a brood box by herself with a bunch of workers, other broods, so that they will attend to her when she comes out, and she doesn't need to swarm because there's no competition, but she will have to be mated later. You can do that, and some people do that as small as 2-frame nucleus colonies. All my nucleus colonies are 5 frames. But if you want to do that in the hive, you need the space to isolate them, but you could, in theory, put cages over each queen cell, and then when she hatches out, they're attended to by the nurse bees. They're fed right through the screen. It can be number 8 screen, or you can make it a little larger. You can make it out of queen excluder material so that the workers can in there, but then you also need to be aware that a freshly hatched virgin queen can often get through a queen excluder. So if you just want to keep her fed and in that little contained area, these need to be bees that are without another queen, because these are unmated, recently hatched queens. Now the question is, why do you want to keep 3 of them? So now here's where I put in my own 2 cents. What I would do if I only had a colony that was missing the queen, that we had queen cells, so we know they're about to replace her, and each queen, by the way, would represent a swarm, potentially. So we don't want that to happen this time of year either. So what you can do is pick your favorite queen cell. And how do you pick that? Hopefully lining up with what the bees themselves are choosing as a favorite queen cell. Look at the physical size of the cells. If they're all the same, then we go to the next step. what's the surface of the queen cell look like? Is it all dimpled and mottled, and is there a whole bunch of work being done on it? That shows that those bees are favoring that queen cell that's got all the extra work on it. Let's say they all have the same amount of extra work on them. Then we look to see how many of the nurse bees are actually clinging to the cell itself. And sometimes you'll see a nurse bee grabbing the cell and vibrating it. And then you get some vibration from the queen inside too, which later can turn into queen piping. So even while she's in the cell, she'll communicate back and they'll grab it and vibrate. And she's vibrating from inside the cell and communicating back out. If that's going on in one particular cell, you already know which one is their favorite. And then you can take the other cells and cut them out and get rid of them altogether. Why do you want to keep 3 cells this time of year, unless you're in the southern hemisphere and you guys are coming into summer? So it doesn't say here where the location is. But me personally, I would pick the cell I wanted, pull the other 2 out, and put them in a nucleus colony somewhere as a backup, just in case this queen, when she hatches, doesn't successfully mate and come back and then provide for the colony as a reproductive resource, of course, which is what the queen is. And then you can come back from one of these other colonies where you hatched out the queen, and that's what nucleus colonies are for, resources to build up and maintain and sustain other colonies that might not be doing well. So that's my recommendation, because it's too late. We can't start new colonies this time of year. That's why I'm wondering about the logic of keeping 3 queens and try to keep them alive in cages. I would much rather select the largest, most robust, most attended to queen cell on that frame and get rid of the other 2 and hold them in another queen starter nuke or something like that if you want to, but then definitely see if they'll take care of her that way and invest in 1. I hope that just gives food for thought. Sometimes I'm just giving opinions out here. So anyway, the next one is from Rodney in Muskego. So what camera works best to use to see how hives are during winter and with regards to inside hive temps? Now those are 2 divergent things for me. Okay, so here's the problem. The camera that I use and have used for many years is this FLIR C2. You carry it in your pocket, you turn it on, it gives you the thermals. What it does not give you is what's going on inside the hive though. So this is where I look at energy efficiency of different beehives, for example. So I can shoot, because what this does is this reads the surface temperature of everything. So you can see if your dog's nose is cold, you can see, people's noses are colder than their eyes and things like that. So it's a lot of fun to use this in a lot of different ways, but when you're shooting the beehive in wintertime, all it does is show me where the cluster is. It doesn't give me the temperature of the actual cluster of bees. But what I look at, since I go into winter with 2 to 3 boxes max, I get a thermal view of it, and I've done a lot of videos showing this. And if we're, to the end of December, and the cluster of bees is still in that lower third of the box or in the middle of the box, and we still have a good, 6 or 7 inches above them before they hit that feeder shim, they're good to go. So that lets me know that they haven't migrated up and used all the honey that's stored above them yet. So that's all the information I'm after. And what does that look like? If it's like 25 degrees outside and I get a 32-degree reading on the surface of the box, only where the cluster is, and then you'll see that beyond the cluster, it matches outside temperature, usually. So this only works with the wooden hives. So if you have one of the really insulated hives, if you've got Lysin or Bmax or something like that, you're not really going to see what's going on with a thermal camera as far as where they're located inside the hive to see if they need more resources or if they're on the verge of needing emergency feeding and things like that. Because I'm trying something new this year myself, because Bee Smart Designs did that insulated cover that I'm evaluating. And by the way, they did refresh their stock at Better Bee, because people were having troubles finding that. But because I'm putting that on top, plus an insulated cover on top of that, I'm not going to put the feeder shim above it unless, with my thermal camera, I see that the bees are actually getting up to that critical area. There's no point in having that up there, so instead I get double insulation. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, these are the covers. And my plan was to put this insulated inner cover on half of my hives, and then have half without, and then of course do the citizen science, very basic, to see if my bees that did not have these did better than the bees that do have them, or vice versa, if they do better with these. And the thing of it is, with these on the swarms that I recently captured last month, and I had these insulated inner covers, the ones that are in hives with the insulated inner covers were building up at a much higher rate, trying to size them the same population, caught at the same time of year, and of course these are my stock. So, and then I have one without, and it's a little slow. It's well behind those that have this insulation. So even in warm weather, the insulated inner cover is benefiting the bees. So I'm abandoning scientific principle. I'm not going to have a control, which is hive without it, other than my long Langstroth and things like that. The long Langstroth and the lay-ins will not have insulated inner covers. But I'm going to go ahead and put these insulated inner covers on all of my Langstroth hives going into winter this year, because I don't know that I can get a lot of science out of it, other than to know that anecdotally they look like they're doing a lot better with them. And it includes those that have these hive gates too, so that's another thing. We put those swarms in boxes, put the insulated covers on them, and there we go. So I'll be able to shoot with the FLIR camera the outside of those, and we'll be able to see if the bees stay lower longer, if they migrate up slower, and if they don't get to the point where, because what we'll do is we'll have this on, and then we'll have an insulated inner cover. I'm using BMAX covers over that. This same company makes what they call the Ultimate Hive cover. And it's designed, of course, to fit exactly over this, and it has air spaces built into it, so that's another, has a drip edge and stuff like that. So that's going to be additional insulation and improvement for my beehives going into winter. And we'll do thermals this winter, and we'll see how they do. So I'm hoping for a much milder winter this time, but that's my camera. The other thing is, when I bought this, I didn't have a cell phone because I was way late in getting a cell phone. So they actually have an attachment, the FLIR C2. It's a variation that goes onto your phone and also reads infrared. So kind of cool to have that, much cheaper than this unit. I don't even know what these sell for right now. I don't keep up with those prices, but that's what I use. But if you've got insulated hives, tool that reads the outside surface of a beehive is not going to be that valuable to you. So you might be looking at those Broodminder thermal sensors that you can stick in there, but that won't necessarily tell you how close the cluster is to the top of your hive unless you put that thermal sensor, which is a really flat piece about this long, and the ID tag sticks out between the boxes so you know which one it's in, and you read it on your phone. So if you put that on the top box, then you would know alive or dead. And then maybe as the cluster gets farther up in there, closer to it, and you start to document data and you've got trends and stuff that you can follow, then you'll see that the clusters that are higher would be warmer because they're closer to the sensor, that kind of thing. So, but it reads the external surface of the hives and everything else. It'll also read the entrances too, so where they're venting. So it is good to have just for fun and to know where your clusters are, even in winter. Next question from Jim Ladd, question number 4. Could you possibly go over the physical appearance of a mated queen versus a virgin queen? Not just the presence or absence of brood and the behavior of the colony, but strictly the physical attributes of a mated queen. There's lots of fun tests for if your queen is mated, but what we do notice is sometimes even when you get a queen, I don't know if you're shopping and get bees through the mail, but when you get a queen, a mated queen through the mail, they tend to be pretty small. And when you look at the queen bee, what parts of her body change dimensions? The only part that changes dimensions is going to be the abdomen of the queen. And that's because she fills up with eggs and her abdomen extends. So when the queen is fully in lay, fully mated, and ready to go, expect to see the wings on the queen go halfway down the length of her abdomen. If they're going 2/3 of the way down the length of her abdomen and you're really having a hard time telling her from worker bees and things like that when you're scanning over the surface of the brood frames, she's probably not in lay because it could be a period of dearth, or she was never mated yet. So if you've got a brand new queen that you know flew out and you're kind of checking to see if she's been mated, if she's laying and stuff, other than the signs that Jim said not to attribute to her. So there's another thing that you can do with queens, which is fun but risky. And when they're in lay and they're nice and heavy, you can put them in a glass cup, nice tall glass cup. And guess what she can't do? She tries to fly up the sides of it and can't because she's too heavy to fly. Now, if it's a younger queen or she's just recently been mated and it really hasn't extended her abdomen yet, she's not super heavy, she could fly up and out of there. So be ready for that. But fully inlay queens, they can't fly. They can try to walk up it while they're flapping their wings. They get partly up, but they keep falling down. So, but the physical attributes, the biggest tell is the abdomen. The longer the abdomen, the more productive she is. So she's fertile. You won't see a queen that has wings that go just halfway down the abdomen that is an infertile queen, or sometimes a secondary queen that might occupy the same hive, but she's not laying, so you have a sister queen in there. They often tend to be really small, look like a worker, and their abdomens are not fully extended and fully plump. And the reason that their abdomens are nice and extended when they're in lay is because they have to reach down into those cells all the way to the bottom, to park their eggs there in the center. So I hope that's helpful. Once you see them, if you see a brand new hatched queen and then you see a queen that's been out, done her mating flights and come back and is in lay, they are dramatically different as far as the abdomens go. Skinny and shorter compared to fatter and longer. Next question, number 5, comes from Robert Hunt from Marshall, Missouri. Tested my hives for varroa mites. They were 1.25% and 0.7%. That's good, right? Now, do I do an OAV in December or not? So this is a judgment call, and it doesn't say tested all my hives for varroa. So if this is the highest, you're doing really good. So then we come down to what would I personally do? Because we did this last year, and the results were remarkably good. So if you've got 1.25%, that means that when you did your alcohol wash or you did your shakes, whatever you did, you ended up with 3 or 4 mites in your count of 300 bees. So if you saw 3 or 4 mites and 300 bees, and those were taken from the brood frames, or they were taken from the open brood in particular, which would have a higher mite count, and that's all you got, those are really good to go. But what would I, now let's go off the rails here, and what would I personally do last week of November, first week of December, when brood is at an all-time low in all of my colonies, and we get one of those great days where it hits 65 degrees or something like that, would I personally treat these hives with oxalic acid vaporization? The answer is yeah, I would. I would definitely record which of these colonies had the lowest mite counts of all of them, and I would make sure that those are identified as my breeders for the following year, for 2022. Those would be the ones that I would reproduce from. But right now, every hive in this apiary is in the acceptable range. But would I treat them and knock those mites out that are left in there? Yes, I would. And that's because we have an opportunity to almost zero out the mites. You can get them down to, you can have a 98% effectiveness on those mites, especially while they're phoretic. And you hear that term, phoretic means that they're not in pupa cells that are capped, they're out, they're on the bees, they're moving around. So that's when you can get them with oxalic acid. That's why historically it's been approved exclusively for broodless periods, winter treatments, and when the honey supers were not on. So now those things are changing. But because you can get them all in one treatment. So I would say, yeah, do it. Heck yeah. And not only that, see what the mite drop is. So clean all your bottom boards, clean your trays, whatever you have. For those of you with flow hives and stuff, pull those trays out, clean them, see if you get a mite drop on there after you do that winter treatment. And here's why this works so well. If we came into spring, if we didn't treat, right, and then spring when we have this time of increase, and you get these mites having the reproductive cycles every time. So they're potentially doubling their numbers in your brood frames every time you have a brood cycle hatch out. So when you're doing that, if we're starting with just 10 mites, then it's 20, then it's 40, then it's 80. See how it goes. But if you had 5 mites, now it's 10, now it's 20, now it's 40. So we delay their expansion in the colony. So I would say take the opportunity midwinter when your brood is at its lowest to knock out those residual mites and kick them while they're down. Don't show any mercy to the mites. I say get them, because that single treatment is highly unlikely to have any negative impact on your bees. So next question, number 6 from Nathan Dew. Are your frames positioned the wrong way? Bees expand outward from the middle, so your brood frame should be in the middle, then food frames, then empty frames on either ends. And this was a comment made on my swarm update, the storm swarm. And I thought I would answer this because this is, other than are your frames positioned the wrong way? No, the frames were not positioned the wrong way, and here's why I'll explain that. I didn't put the brood to the side, because if we look at the way the storm swarm was collected and hived, they survived through a lot of rain and everything. But anyway, we did an update on that 30 days after their install, and they had drawn out and were using these plastic heavy waxed frames. Now those frames came here on the day that I collected the swarm, so it was like a godsend. All of a sudden the FedEx guy was there, dropped off a bunch of stuff, and I had finally deep frames I could put in a deep box that I did not have up until that moment, so now I can hive the swarm. So what did I do? I hived the swarm with no drawn frames. So all of it was just heavy waxed foundation. So we put in 10 deep frames and we dumped that swarm of bees in that box. So it's not what I did. So I didn't position them the wrong way. And then the follow-on statement here is bees expand outward from the middle, so your brood frame should be in the middle, then the food frames, then empty frames on either end. Well, your argument is not with me, but with the bees themselves. They're the ones that built first on the eastern side of the beehive, and then they expanded towards the west, and they also kept their brood towards the southern end of the beehive. So the bees do that on their own. Now on the flip side of that, for those who are interested, if we're doing a split or something like that, and we're going to take apart a hive and we're going to make 2 colonies where we currently have 1. So in the springtime, when you get this full colony of bees, you got to split them, otherwise they're going to swarm or something like that. Then these statements hold true. In other words, if I'm going to pull out brood frames, I'm going to stick them in the center of the hive, in that box. And then the next, I'm going to put food and resources to the outside of that. And then we're going to have the empty frames out beyond that. So when we're setting it up, sure, that is the normal logic. But what the bees are doing, because bees don't read our books, they don't know what they're supposed to do. So what they did was they built on whatever part of the hive warms first at the beginning of the day. So here, that's the eastern side of the hive or the southeastern corner of the hive, and that's where they focus their brood and resource building, and then they extend towards the west. So if we're watching with the, and that's consistent throughout my apiary, they all build towards the east and the south by southeast of the hive, and then they spread on their own. But if we get in there, because we've read books and we know stuff, we install everything dead center because that's the way we think it should be organized, because it makes sense to us. So that's where that comes from, and that's why I did that. So it wasn't my arrangement at all. We just opened it up, looked at them, and of course found the queen, marked the queen, so that was pretty cool. Good video. But that's it was their arrangement, not mine. So the next question is number 7, Nurse Steve. I've seen videos of keepers who catch swarms and then discover the swarm is queenless. While gathering up the swarm of bees, they introduce a new queen to them. And that causes the swarm to then thrive in a new apiary hive. It seems to me that these keepers keep queens on hand for that purpose. How does a keeper keep a supply of viable queens? So first of all, the swarm collecting thing that's absent a queen. Bees don't swarm without a queen. So the queen was there at some point, because you know what they do? And we did this, I did this study several times over, and it's a practical backyard, my level study. So years ago, like 2008, 2009, we find a cluster of bees on a tree. So they're swarmed and they're bivouacked. And so I went in there and I looked for the queen. And the queen came out and did a little crowd surfing thing and then would go back in and did that several times. So I decided to catch the queen, put her in a little queen cage and hold her and see what happened. And then they didn't leave the cluster. So what happened was then another queen showed up. So I actually had two queens in that swarm, which sometimes happens. And so the queen came out, I caught her. And then within moments of the queen being removed from that swarm, from that temporary bivouac where they're hanging on a tree, they started getting active on the surface and they're looking all over because they're all connected by the queen's pheromone. So then what did those bees do in the absence of the queen, since I took them away? They went back to the hive that they departed from because they have no queen to follow, no queen to cluster around, and no queen pheromone to keep them cohesive. So my question is, how do they catch a swarm that wasn't in disarray for missing its queen and not have the queen? So I have to think that they collected a swarm somewhere and the queen either fell on the ground or the queen was still on the tree or the queen was still present somewhere. This is why when you're collecting a swarm of bees, you need to put them in the box that you've got them in, and then you need to observe their Nasonov glands at the entrance, and you need to see if the bees that are outside the box are following a pheromone into it, which would indicate that the queen is present. So that's just so that we can understand what keeps a cluster of bees together when they're in swarm mode, and it's the queen herself, and in the absence of the queen, they dispatch, they spread out, they take off, they go back to their original hive if that's possible, unless it was destroyed for some reason. So then the next part is, how would beekeepers keep queens handy? So this year, we keep a bank of nucleus colonies, and I use this as a resource through the year. So I didn't need to order, queens when I found a colony that was queenless and I was a little late. And for example, there were no eggs to make new queens from. So there they were, just queenless, broodless, and in decline. So now I can go over to my nucleus colony and I can do one of two things depending on what time of year it is. I can pull a frame of brood that has eggs and resources on it and nurse bees, and I can stick that right in that colony that is without brood, and then they'll make their own queen from those eggs. Or, which is what I did also, I can go and get the frame that's got the queen on it with her brood, with her nurse bees, and I can take that frame and go and I can stick that in the swarm box that you've collected or in the colony that's queenless. And we did that when Eli was here from New Mexico, so it's Eli's inspection was the video. So I pulled two frames with a queen, put that in there, they were queenless, and they reestablished themselves. What I left in the nucleus hive, which is only a 5 frame deep, eggs, resources for them to make another queen. And that keeps the nucleus small, because that's my problem. And why historically I don't like to keep nucleus colonies is because they build so fast, they outgrow the nucleus, and now I have to hide them somewhere, and I don't need more bees. So as a resource hive, now I can just pull frames as needed and reinforce smaller colonies that maybe are lagging behind the others and keep my nucleus colony small. So I'm guessing that other beekeepers are doing that. They're having nucleus colonies, which keeps them in eggs and brood and nurse bees as they need them. It also keeps them, in my case now, I have 4 extra queens in there. And if you let them build too fast and they get too large, we turn them into double deckers. So now they're 10 deep frame, double nucleus colonies, which is what you could technically go into winter with. And that's what Mike Palmer up in Vermont does. So he has nucleus colonies that are double 5s. So it's a 10 frame. And they're one directly on top of another, and he gets them through winter. So we'll experiment with that this year too, insulating the top, bundling them all together, and then seeing how they're going to do going through winter, and if I'll have a spring resource. And if not, we haven't lost an entire colony. But that's how you can bank queens and queen resources in the form of eggs and things like that for other hives in your backyard apiary. So I hope that explains that. That's what I do, but I would like to explain something else. that happened recently when it comes to collecting swarms is I was out there testing that Colorado bee vac, which is so much fun to use. And I went out and got another late season swarm that was really big. It was this big around, and it probably was that size, 3 feet high. So I got my Colorado bee vac and I put it in my Gorilla Cart, and I went out there and I sucked it off of there. It took a long time doing it and got them all into the box. And then I thought it was going to be cool, just like before, when I put it on a 10 frame deep Langstroth box, and then I put a bee escape underneath of it. And then I pull that cookie sheet out, and now they'll overnight go through the bee escape, and then they'll be in that bottom box. So the next day I pull that off, and the catch box that's part of that Colorado bee vac would be empty, just like it was the last time, clean as a whistle. And that's not what happened. So I went out there the next day, about midday, expecting to find all the bees out of the catch box from that Colorado bee vac, and to find them all down into the brood box, doing their thing, fanning at the entrance, already doing orientation flights and all that jazz. But what happened was I went and opened it, and I pulled that Colorado bee vac box off of there, and there's like 4 pounds of bees in it. They didn't go down below. And then you look at the deep box, and you might be saying, well, Fred, why didn't you put that in your review? Because you said it worked really well. Well, I'll get to that. So there was a colony established in that box, the brood box that I put them on, getting them to go through. And the rest of them were not just still up in the catch box, they were tight. They were really formed up firm up there. So when I took it off, I turned it upside down. I put it in front of the landing board, because now I'm going to see all those bees go trooping right inside the hive, because somehow it just failed to have that escape board under there. And I was using, for those who want to know, the Great Escape Sericell escape board. So anyway, guess what happened? They wouldn't go through the entrance either. But yet I had all this activity in the hive. And then, because I'm a genius, I figured it out. There's another queen. And so what I actually had in that big catch box was 2 colonies. So I took that over and I put it in front of the lay-ins hive. And then I put that, had the little opening there, and then I just figured that if I scoop handfuls of them up and I stick it up to that entrance, they'll walk off my hand and they'll go into the lay-ins hive, and then they'll come out and they'll tell the others, hey, place to live, and they'll all go in there. And that's what they did. And sure enough, there's a queen in each of those colonies. So what I had was a big single swarm, is what it looked like, but it had 2 queens. It was actually 2 separate swarms that clustered together because it was getting cold at night. And that's why they wouldn't go in the box that I had already started to occupy. Very interesting learning situation there. So now I got 2 colonies from 1 swarm, and you might be wondering, how are they doing? They're doing great. Thanks for asking. So that's it. Long way around the barn on that. Question number 7. Now we're moving on to question number 8, which is from, no name. So if you don't give me the name, at least you can tell me maybe where you're from. It might help. Here it says, I'm learning every type of hive has its strengths and weaknesses. Do you have any techniques to combine 2 colonies in a horizontal hive, long lang, that has only 1 entrance? Yes, I do. Because, by the way, stepping back to the previous question, in that lay-ins hive, I already have a colony in the lay-ins hive. And the lay-ins hives, the way they come, you can find out more at horizontalbeekeeping.com, which is Dr. Leo Sherishkin's website. It has 3 openings on the front of the hive. So I had 1 colony that's established in there, and then I have a divider board, and then I was going to take those out of this box and let them migrate into it because I don't have another hive to put them in. But what's my long-term plan? To join the 2 into 1 colony. So I open the dial, so there's 1 hole there, and that's the one that they went in. So now they're occupying the same hive, 2 different colonies of bees, but they also have their entrances on the front that are only like 1.5 feet apart from each other. You know what the bees are doing? They're freely going between both hives, and that's because that divider board is not airtight. They can smell each other in there. So they're actually showing preference for 1 queen or the other, and I'm guessing the existing queen because she's mated, and the queen they swarmed with was probably a virgin queen. Her pheromones aren't as strong, and she's losing her stock to the original one, and I'm going to pull that divider board out and let them join up. So here's what I did. So here's a drawing, and let's zoom in on it. So what we're looking at here is, this is a long Langstroth hive, which is the situation that we have. Here's the entrance, and my Langstroth hive is 5 feet, but this is just going to give you an idea of something that you can do to join your bees together. And this is the existing colony over here. Now what you need is an extra divider board or follower board, whatever you want to call it. And for my long Langstroth, those are 2x stalks or 1.5 inches thick. And what we want to do is, if we're going to put a secondary swarm in here, or the weaker colony that we want to combine with the established colony, we need to put a board in here that has holes in it. And these holes, it's not critical what size they are. What matters is that there's airflow between the two colonies, so they get familiar with each other's scent. The queen pheromone becomes familiar, but they can't physically contact each other. So we put number 8 hardware cloth on each side of this divider board. And you can have 1-inch holes, whatever size you decide. That's not critical because you've got hardware cloth on both sides. It just allows airflow to go between the two. I also recommend that the airflow holes are at the bottom of your divider board, not at the top, because that will allow them to keep this upper area warm. These are the cover boards above, and then the airflow will be down here. And then once they've gotten used to one another, you can just pull this board out, push all these frames together, and keep your divider board back here, which is what you needed the solid divider board at the other end, because this is your empty space, and that keeps this colony in a nice small confined space. But remember, they don't have an entrance. So you're only going to keep this here for about a week, then you're going to pull it up and you're going to let them combine. That's my recommendation. There's probably other ways to do it, but that's what I would do. Have a divider board ready that's got hardware cloth on both sides, holes so they are vented to one another but can't travel back and forth, and there won't be any fighting until they've gotten the pheromones all put in there, and then they'll be good to go. See? So that was my recommendation on how to do that. 2 divider boards. The solid one goes to the outside, the vented one goes to the middle, then you put your group in there. And that was the last question for the day. So we have something interesting to talk about here for the fluff section at the end. And I was contacted by the inventor of the hive gates, and his name is Kyle. And they're from BIQ Solutions. So those of you who've been following this entrance that we've been using, the feedback has been really good. The feedback to the company has been really good. And we started a citizen science group. And by citizen science, I mean, this is just people that got them. How's it working? There's no, it's not exhaustive data. It's not like we're really applying the scientific method. We're just looking at them and sharing information through a Facebook group. The Facebook group is called the HiveGate, Citizen Science Program. We have another Facebook group that's called The Way to Bee, and that's for all beekeepers and backyard beekeepers. That's the emphasis on it. So, but he contacted me and said they're going to do a giveaway of some units to show their appreciation for what we've been doing, the information we've been providing as feedback. For those of you who don't know, I'll just give you a quick rundown. The HiveGate is an entrance for your beehive that, depending on where you are this time of year, your hives might be getting attacked by yellow jackets. So the yellow jackets are pinging all of my hives now. They're trying to get in every entrance, and they are not getting in through these entrances, and that's really kind of the primary design of these, is so that predators do not get in here. We're about to go into winter here in the United States, so what else do they not need? They don't need mouse guards because mice cannot get in them. The feedback that we're getting from people that have purchased these, including myself, of course, I'm providing feedback too, and that's why I decided to put the Citizen Science group together so that everybody could share with one another what's working, what isn't. The designer, the owner of this, is not part of the group, and the whole point was so that we could badmouth it, or we could say it's good, or it stinks, or whatever, without insulting people. You know what I'm saying? So, but the feedback's been really good. They want to give out gift packages. So what we're going to do is on those groups, so the Way to Bee or the HiveGate Citizen Science Group, and I'll put links down in the comments section of this video So you can go and find those. If you're not on Facebook, I don't know what to do. There might be some extra, like you can fill out a form on my webpage. It's undecided yet. But we're going to do 5 weeks of giveaways. Well, they're going to do it, and I'm going to provide them with whoever. You're going to enter a drawing, and we're going to draw it every week, and then somebody's going to get a package. Now, if you're not interested in these, don't enter, because what you're going to get is a Hive Gate kit, and you're going to get the entrance reducers, and you're going to get also the unit that goes into nucleus hives as well. So you get a whole package. Totally free, just to thank people, he said, for all the information that we're providing, the feedback that we're giving. So 5 weeks, we'll give out 2 per week, so 1 for each group, 1 for the Way to Be, and the other for the HiveGate Citizen Science group. And the first giveaway will be 24 September, and instructions will be posted on both of those groups. And so 2 a week for 5 weeks, and then you'll get them. And that's just... It says it's not to promote the website or to get people to go to BIQ Solutions, but just to show gratitude for the people that have been providing very helpful feedback from all over the world. So that's cool. These come from New Zealand. And I believe they even changed the name of them. We call it the HiveGate, HYFEGATE. The company is BIQ Solutions, but now it's actually called the HiveGate. So they did some legal wrangling and were able to use that phrase. So HiveGate or HiveGate, they're both the same unit. So, and they're working really well here, and everybody's feedback has been terrific on these. And now the big tell is going to happen. We're going to find out how they do in the wintertime, because here I'm in the snow belt and we have these. I would say that my colonies that have them in tandem, so the double units on the large size colonies, are doing really well, and they're building up just as fast as the colonies that have normal entrances. So that doesn't mean that they're better than a normal entrance or worse, but what it does mean is they don't impede progress with your bees. The other question that I got a lot of was, can queens fly out and do virgin flights and get through these? They sure can. Can they swarm through them? They absolutely can and have on my colonies. So they're working. So that's that little bit of interest that's coming up. The other thing is, I think that's about it overall. I don't have anything to report because we already talked about the seeds and the plants and the floral sources and everything else. So I'm going to wish you an excellent weekend and hope that you learned something today. Thanks for watching and being here. Have a great weekend.